What happens when a television host, who prides herself on always having the last word, challenges a Southern comedian who has spent a lifetime winning over even the toughest crowds with kindness, quick thinking, and perfect timing? You're about to witness a moment that turned an ordinary daytime interview into something viewers couldn't stop talking about. It all began when Joy Behar took aim at Leanne Morgan's small-town upbringing, convinced that a few sarcastic remarks would leave the comedian speechless. Instead, she discovered that genuine Southern charm paired with years of experience can be far more powerful than sharp criticism. What followed caught everyone in the studio off guard. The laughter came at the most unexpected moments, and the atmosphere shifted in a way no one saw coming. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. For what many viewers considered one of the most unforgettable moments in the show's history, the interview took a direction nobody expected. Before we get into the story, be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments, because this is one conversation you'll definitely want to weigh in on. The morning began like any other at The View. Crew members moved quickly behind the scenes, cameras were being checked, and the audience buzzed with anticipation. Yet there was an unmistakable excitement in the air. Leanne Morgan was scheduled to appear, and although she wasn't a typical Hollywood superstar, she had become one of the biggest names in comedy. Her hit Netflix special had introduced her to millions of new fans. Her nationwide tours were selling out almost instantly, and at 58 years old, she had proven that success doesn't have an expiration date. Unlike overnight sensations, Leanne's journey had taken decades. She had sharpened her skills in tiny comedy clubs, community events, church basements, and wherever people were willing to listen. Every performance became another lesson, every audience another opportunity to improve. That persistence eventually transformed her into one of America's most beloved comedians. The moment she arrived at the studio, it was obvious why audiences adored her. She greeted security guards with warm hugs, complimented the makeup team, and spent several minutes chatting with a young production assistant about a family biscuit recipe. Nothing about her friendliness felt rehearsed. It was simply who she was, a woman who never forgot her roots and treated every person she met like an old friend stopping by for coffee and conversation. Soon the studio lights came up, and Leanne took her place at the famous table. She greeted each host with genuine excitement, her unmistakable Tennessee accent immediately filling the room with warmth. "Oh my goodness," she laughed. "I am so happy to be here. I've watched this show ever since my children were little, and now I'm actually sitting at this table. My mama isn't going to believe this." The audience instantly connected with her sincerity. In an industry where polished appearances often overshadow authenticity, Leanne's excitement felt refreshingly real. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed her with genuine enthusiasm. "Our next guest has taken the comedy world by storm. Her Netflix special became a massive success. Her tours sell out almost immediately, and many people have called her one of the funniest comedians in America. Please welcome Leanne Morgan." The crowd erupted into applause as Leanne smiled and waved with heartfelt appreciation. "Y'all are just too sweet," she said. "Thank you so much. This feels like a big family reunion. Except nobody's asked why I'm still single." She paused with perfect calming before grinning. "Oh wait, I'm married. I forget that part sometimes. We've been together for 33 years, and on certain days I still can't remember his name. I just yell, 'Hey,' and hope he answers." The audience burst into laughter. It was classic Leanne, relatable, self-deprecating, and effortlessly funny. As the conversation continued, Sarah Haynes asked about the long road that had led to her success. Leanne shared stories from years spent balancing comedy with raising 3 children, performing for small crowds, and refusing to quit even when bigger opportunities seemed far away. "I always tell people it's never too late," she explained. "While some comedians were getting television deals, I was performing at church basements and Rotary Club luncheons." She smiled before adding another punchline. But those church ladies taught me more about comedy than any club ever could. If you can make a Baptist woman laugh about menopause, you can make absolutely anybody laugh. The audience loved every second of it. Even Hoopy nodded with admiration as Leanne's natural storytelling won over the room. Then everything changed. Joy Behar, who had spent most of the interview quietly watching with a familiar smile, finally leaned forward. There was a noticeable shift in her expression, and the tone of the conversation changed almost instantly. "So, Leanne," Joy began, her words carrying a hint of skepticism, "your comedy really revolves around small-town life, doesn't it? Walmart, casseroles, country living. Don't you think that's a little limiting? Shouldn't comedy push people to think instead of simply making them comfortable? Isn't your style more like comfort food than meaningful comedy?" The room grew noticeably quieter. It wasn't just a question. It sounded like a challenge, carefully framed to minimize everything Leanne had spent decades building. But there was one thing Joy seemed to overlook. Leanne Morgan hadn't survived years of performing for unpredictable audiences by losing her composure. She had learned long ago that the strongest response isn't always the loudest one. And what happened next would leave the entire studio watching in complete disbelief. Leanne's smile never faded. "Well, Joy, I appreciate the question," she said warmly. "You know, my mama used to say that sometimes people can get so caught up in sounding clever that they forget how to connect with folks. I never fully understood what she meant growing up, but I've thought about it plenty over the years." The audience chuckled, and the tension eased for just a moment. "As for my comedy," she continued, "I don't really think it's about Walmart or casseroles. Those are just the details. The real stories are about family, friendship, growing older, raising children, and finding humor in everyday life. Those experiences don't belong to one town or one state. They belong to everybody." She paused before adding with a smile, "No matter where you live, everybody has an embarrassing family story." Laughter rippled through the studio. "But isn't that a convenient way to frame it?" Joy replied. "Your material clearly resonates with a certain audience. Do you ever worry you're simply telling people what they already want to hear, instead of challenging them?" The room grew noticeably quieter. Leanne tilted her head, still smiling. "I've spent decades performing for audiences from every walk of life," she answered. "One thing I've learned is that people have a lot more in common than they realize. A working mom in New York and a working mom in Tennessee may have different accents, but they're probably worrying about many of the same things before they go to bed." She leaned forward slightly. "My goal has never been to divide a room. It's always been to bring one together. If people leave laughing at themselves instead of each other, I feel like I've done my job." Several audience members applauded. Joy wasn't ready to let it go. "Popularity doesn't automatically equal quality," she said. "Lots of things are popular." Leanne laughed out loud. "Well, that's true," she replied. "I've been compared to worse things over the years. My own family has been my toughest audience." The crowd laughed with her. "My mother-in-law once criticized my cooking so honestly that I thought she'd been practicing the speech all week. After surviving family dinners, television interviews don't scare me much." The applause grew louder. She continued, still calm and cheerful. "I've always believed that every audience deserves to see their lives reflected with kindness and humor. Whether someone lives in a big city or a small town, their stories matter." Her voice stayed gentle, but every word landed with confidence. "I don't think comedy has to make people feel small in order to make a point. Sometimes the strongest joke is the one that reminds us we're all a little ridiculous." The audience responded with another round of applause. Leanne smiled toward Joy. "My mama also taught me something else," she said. "If someone underestimates you, don't argue. Just keep smiling, Do your job, and let the room decide. For a brief moment, the studio fell silent. Then laughter and applause filled the room once again, as the conversation took on an entirely different energy. "This is getting ridiculous," the host said, her frustration beginning to show. "I'm trying to have a serious discussion about comedy, and you keep answering with charming stories instead of direct arguments." Leanne's smile never faded. "Am I avoiding the question?" she asked gently. "Or am I simply not reacting the way you expected?" The audience grew quiet. Sometimes people walk into a conversation expecting the other person to become defensive, and when that doesn't happen, they mistake composure for avoidance. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The moderator attempted to steer the interview in a different direction. "Why don't we talk about your upcoming tour and what's next for?" But the conversation returned to the same topic. "Popularity and importance aren't the same thing," the host continued. "Some comedians leave a lasting impact on society. What lasting difference does your comedy actually make?" Leanne nodded thoughtfully. "You know," she said softly, "that's a fair question." She paused long enough for the studio to become completely still. "I receive letters from people all over the country. Some tell me they watched one of my specials while sitting through difficult medical treatments because laughter helped them forget their fear for a little while." The audience listened in complete silence. "Others tell me they watched my shows after losing someone they loved because, for an hour, they could remember what it felt like to smile again." Her voice remained calm, but every sentence carried genuine emotion. "And every now and then someone says they were having one of the hardest weeks of their life, but laughing reminded them there was still hope waiting on the other side." She looked around the table. "If my stories can give someone 60 minutes of relief from pain, loneliness, or grief, then I'd say they've accomplished something meaningful." A wave of applause swept across the studio. Leanne waited for it to settle before continuing. "I've never believed comedy has to change the entire world." She smiled warmly. "Sometimes changing one person's evening is enough." The room became noticeably quieter. "I've met people after shows who told me laughter helped them reconnect with family, face difficult seasons with courage, or simply remember that joy still exists. Those conversations stay with me far longer than ticket sales or television ratings ever could." She folded her hands. "So when people ask whether my comedy matters, I don't think about reviews or headlines. I think about those faces." The audience responded with another round of applause. The host remained unconvinced. "But your material is still centered on ordinary life," she replied. "Family, growing older, everyday frustrations." Leanne laughed softly. "Exactly." Her answer caught everyone off guard. "Those ordinary moments are where most people actually live. The jokes may be about aging, parenting, marriage, or grocery shopping. But underneath them, they're really about love, resilience, insecurity, forgiveness, and learning not to take ourselves too seriously." She smiled again. "The details make people laugh. The emotions are what make them stay." Another pause settled over the room. "I've learned something after all these years," Leanne continued. "People rarely remember every joke you told. They remember how you made them feel." The applause returned, louder than before. "And if someone walks away feeling a little lighter than they did when they arrived," she smiled toward the audience, "then that's a pretty good day's work." The tension in the studio reached its highest point. The host pushed back her chair with a sharp scrape across the floor. "I don't think this conversation is going anywhere," she said, frustration evident in her voice. Leanne remained exactly as she had been from the beginning, relaxed, smiling, and completely composed. "You don't have to agree with me," she replied. "That's the wonderful thing about comedy. There's room for all kinds of voices." The audience listened in complete silence. "I've spent my career telling stories about ordinary people," Leanne continued. "Families, neighbors, friendships, growing older, making mistakes, and finding something to laugh about anyway. Those stories may seem simple, but simple doesn't mean shallow." She paused before adding with a gentle smile, "The things that bring us together are often the smallest moments." The room erupted into applause. The host hesitated, seemingly unsure how to respond. Leanne didn't raise her voice or celebrate the moment. Instead, she spoke with the same warmth she'd carried throughout the interview. "I don't have any hard feelings," she said sincerely. "Healthy disagreement is part of every good conversation. I just hope we can remember that making people laugh doesn't have to come at someone else's expense." The audience applauded again. "There are comedians who challenge audiences by asking difficult questions," Leanne continued. "There are comedians who help people escape life's pressures for a little while. Neither approach is wrong. They're simply different ways of connecting with people." She smiled toward the crowd. "And at the end of the day, connection is what matters most." The applause grew even louder. The moderator finally broke the silence with a smile. "Well," she laughed, "I don't think anyone expected today's conversation to unfold quite like this." The audience laughed along. Leanne shrugged playfully. "My mama always told me that kindness costs less than winning an argument." That line earned another wave of applause. She turned toward the camera one last time. "To everyone watching at home, thank you for spending your time with us. If my stories have ever made you smile, laugh with your family, or helped brighten a difficult day, then I couldn't ask for anything more." She smiled warmly. "We're all trying our best, and sometimes sharing a laugh is enough to remind us that we're not alone." The audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. As the lights began to dim, one message lingered above everything else. Real strength isn't always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's the quiet confidence to stay gracious, stay authentic, and let kindness speak louder than conflict ever could. What did you think of this fictional talk show showdown? Who made the stronger case? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic stories, unforgettable moments, and entertaining conversations.